to the Cannabis Data Science meetup group. Happy to have you all here. It could be the best Cannabis Data Science meetup yet. So there's some real cool things that we'll cover today. So I think you'll be in for a treat. So without further ado, how about I jump into it and then we can talk about the data and statistics and cannabis insights as we go. So for those of you who are new, we do we started last February, and we've been collecting data steadily throughout the year. We've hit so many states. We've hit Oklahoma, Oregon, we've got Colorado, Washington. Lately, we've been looking a lot at Massachusetts, and really just looking at states all over the country. And so the reason we're doing this is we're trying to essentially build nice collection mechanisms so that way people can collect data for themselves. So here I've just started an ongoing list of all the states, whether or not they have cannabis data or not, and then what we've done about collecting the data. We need to start completing some of these, and so some of these are near completion. So, for example, Illinois, we're near completion, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and really just tie up some of the loose ends. And so it will be exciting as we start to check off the boxes for each of these states. Washington also can start to move this towards completion, but there's still so much data wrangling to do that are you ever finished? So this is a nice ongoing project. So if you want to get your hands on the scripts or you contribute, definitely give the repository a star, and then if you watch the repository, you can get notified whenever there are updates. So whenever I post the latest code, if you were able to make it to the meetup that week, well, you can still get notified that the latest presentation was just uploaded. And in general, and from now on, I'm going to try to upload the meetups 1 hour before the actual meetup. That way you can get in here and start familiarizing yourself with the script, or even get your hands on the data ahead of time. So that way you can potentially follow along. But it's not critical. This is here for perpetuity, so feel free to enjoy. And it's all licensed under the MIT license, so simply include the copyright and the license, and you're off to the races to use the code however you see fit. So that's just a quick introduction to what we're doing here in the group. And so, as I teased, we're in for a great treat today. So, first thing first, start with the data. So, I've compiled all of the data that we've collected diligently throughout the meetup. Ooh, and Heather, do you have a question?
Hey, I'm not trying to be a begging chooser or whatever. Maybe somebody in the chat room. I can't access my chat, but the quality of maybe it's mine or your audio is kind of sporadic / choppy. Oh, Graham, I've been trying to get in touch with you. Can I copy your LinkedIn format on your description?
I'll let you talk recently while I try to work on the connection.
I don't really have a built-up LinkedIn yet. I have one from prior to my disability, but you can totally get in touch with me with my LinkedIn,
No, I
or I
can't because
could leave.
you have premium. So I don't have premium, so I can't message you. So I tried connecting with you. I can't do that. So I have a year and a half of employment to a gap to explain. I can't be on camera right now. I'm pretty sick. Anyway, so great. Maybe I'll get in touch with you another way. So anyway, Keegan, your audio is kind of jumping around.
Yes.
So
Let's do another catch. Am I coming in any better?
not really. Maybe somebody else can comment. Maybe somebody else feels the same way. I'll let them speak.
I can try to reduce some of my bandwidth, but is it unbearable to continue or?
Not by I mean, I'm going to let somebody else determine that, but I feel like I can only hear every few of your words, not every word. So
I think, Keegan,
Yes.
I think it's going to need to be more of a visual. You're going to have to speak slower. It's just because we have enough people in here that it may lag a little bit just because of internet connection. But
Okay.
also I posted my email in the in-call messages.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's still Graham like the cracker, but I would love to be in touch with people in Maryland that use medical cannabis.
Thank you. I was just, yeah, because you have premium, I wasn't able to connect. So awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Am I still with you?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll try to do mostly visual. So today we are going to look at all the data we've collected through the year so far. So as you can see, we've collected a lot of data points from many states. So just a quick overview of the goal of today. So we've looked at the various states. Well, today we're going to try to forecast for all these states. So the ones we've at least collected data for, so Illinois, Massachusetts, Washington, Colorado, and Oregon. And we'll apply the 10 commandments of forecasting. So we're going to be forecasting sales. We're doing this so that everybody has a nice transparent model for their own value and their own understanding of the industry. So we're making this public knowledge. We're acknowledging that our forecasts are imperfect, so people should not put too much stake in our forecasts since we've done these fairly quickly. Our forecast horizon will be 2022 because much further than 2022 and we start to lose credibility and predictability. And much shorter than that and it's not as valuable. So we'll be predicting 2022. We're going to use an atheoretical model today. So we'll just use total sales as well as just a few natural things like month effects. We'll use the atheoretical model just to keep it simple. As a as a reader of Edward Tufte, I always emphasize that you should put a lot of work into presenting your results in a beautiful, informational way. So visualizing data is key, especially to explaining data to other people. Then we'll analyze our forecasts. And the coolest thing is we can iterate on this. So coming into 2022, we'll be able to judge all of our forecasts that we've made. And then if our forecast model is really poor, then we can think about ways to improve it. So, and then we'll go back to step one. So this is sort of an iterative process that you can follow to forecast. So without further ado, let's do some forecasts. So I've just read in a handful of useful packages here. DateUtil is a new one that we haven't used yet. And so this we'll be using to manipulate time. And so the other ones, Matplotlib, Pandas, PMD, Arima, Seaborn, we've touched on these before. And then these are just a couple handy helper functions. So first things first, let's get our paws on the data. That's not what we want. Awesome. And so, you can start to we can start to just do summary statistics, right? We've got total sales, we're starting to look at retailers, we've got the population, we're even starting to get things like prices. So we know we've got the data here. Now, first things first, we need to look at the data, right? Because this is just a pile of numbers here. So here I'm just going to add a time index simply to still getting new to VS Code's hotkeys, so bear with me. I like the visual interface a little better sometimes for VS Code, but I'm still getting used to it, so bear with me. But we've got some good visualizations coming up, so let's just go ahead and get to these. So first things first, let's just look at the total sales. So this is the data that we've diligently collected starting in February and throughout the year. I still have to add the Oklahoma data, and then there are a few other states that I think we could easily add. Well, maybe not easily, but we could try to add, such as California. I haven't tried to add Arizona yet. So there's still a few more states to add, but these are the ones that we've covered. So Colorado, of course, at the top. And so as you can see, Colorado has quite a head start. So it'll be interesting to see if the other states, get to the level of sales that Colorado is currently at. Illinois has recently overtaken Washington for total sales. So that's an interesting observation. And then, of course, we've noted that Massachusetts is quite volatile. So whereas you see Oregon, Washington, and Colorado increase sales in April and May of 2020, you see, right, the spike, the downward spike in sales to zero in Massachusetts as stores were closed. And then they were just open for about a week in May. So that's why sales are low during that period. So it's real interesting because Massachusetts is the only state that really closed stores. So there's potentially, differential analysis that can be done there to parse out various effects of cannabis consumption. I mean, there's a myriad of studies you could do. So keep that in mind. And then we just have limited sales data for Maryland. And then here's Maine, which has a small population, which explains the small number of sales. But Maine even may have a disproportionately low number of sales. And maybe because they're right next door to Massachusetts, who knows? One thing that Maine does have are prices. Just checking, is the audio coming in to the point where you can follow along?
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Sorry, I didn't do a good job of relaying back the appropriate feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Just, it's got to be, otherwise, what's the point of listening? So, okay, anywho, moving along. We've got the price per gram in just a couple of states, but this is a valuable data point. And so it would be awesome to add this data point in more states. We could add it in Washington. It's just going to take a lot of work. So be on the eye out for price data because it's valuable. But what we can observe is, Maine and Massachusetts have comparable prices, with Maine originally being above Massachusetts and current day below. Interestingly, Oregon is famous for their prices falling through the floor prices. So it's really going to be tough to explain what's going on in Oregon. So I don't have a ready explanation. There may be things going on with, black market cannabis, or it just could be just a ton of supply. There just could just be licensing may be quite easy in Oregon. So there may just be a ton of supply and prices have just gone down. Another thing is it could be a time effect. So it could be that, Oregon and Washington, they've had cannabis for many years now, going on a decade for Washington. And so you may just expect the market dynamics, the players that have operated in there, they've found ways to cut prices, right? The producers have found ways to grow more efficiently. People have found economies of scale. Demand may have risen. Well, actually, that may not be the case. That would push prices up. So I'm thinking so probably more supply side factors. So things that would push supply up. So either an increase in supply or better technology. So it could just be that people in Oregon just have much, much better cultivation technology than they do in Massachusetts and Maine. It could be cheaper to produce cannabis in Oregon than it is to produce cannabis in Massachusetts and Maine, right? So people may be growing outdoor, which may be harder to do in Massachusetts and Maine. So that could be a factor as well.
I think we had a question coming from the audience.
Oh, yes. And the question would be?
No, I raised my hand, but I was just going to add what Keegan just said. It was very intellectual, and it does make sense. I know why it happened, and Keegan has said it, but I'm just wondering what Keegan's going to say next. I'm learning a lot. That's why I unraised my hand.
Awesome. And don't let me steal the show, because ultimately it's a meetup, right? So right. The idea is to have a conversation. So don't let me steal the show. I just put this together just to kind of have some guiding direction for the group. So if I ramble along too long and you've got a good comment, then definitely chime in. So that was the main points I had for pricing. So just, it'll be interesting to observe how things go. So I think we did forecasts of Oregon prices earlier in the year, and we need to check those. And I actually predicted that Oregon prices would increase through 2021. I called it, inflation of cannabis prices, but you're still seeing deflation of cannabis prices, with prices going down in Oregon. So real interesting. And so only time will tell. And so we'll just keep tracking these. So we'll keep tracking Maine and Massachusetts and Oregon, and add Washington to the mix and see if we can't add some more. Okay. Now time for the fun bits. So we've got all this awesome sales data here. And actually, we can maybe predict prices. So that could be a novel exercise. But what I've put together is predicting sales. Actually, prices may be more interesting. So we'll maybe try to save time to predict prices. But basically, I won't spend too much time on the code, since the data is more interesting than the code. But long story short, we're just going to iterate over the states. We get the data for a specific state. So I need to quit doing that. We'll get the data for a specific state, Colorado data. And then there's two ways to do this. The first way, I'll just start with the month fixed effects and then show you the potential problem with those. But basically, I'm just going to add a dummy variable here for the month. So that way, we just have a 0 or 1 depending on the month. Then I'm going to define the forecast horizon. So basically, we don't quite have data through the end of the year. So we only have data for Colorado through October. So we'll actually have to forecast November, December, and then the 12 months of 2022. But we'll do that. No problem. And then we just have to forecast our month effects, which we can do with 100% accuracy because we always know what month it's going to be. And so this is a point. If you're going to be adding fixed effects for forecasting, you also have to forecast your effects. And so that can introduce, additional error into your model. using month is just a real easy one. And then and I'll show you why here in a second, but why the downside. But we're sort of going to be using the black box auto ARIMA that PMD ARIMA provides to the forecast. And so the pros and the cons about using packages are, the pros are, right, there are many built-in features, and right, there are many contributors to, right, to really iron out the code. The downside is it's a bit of a black box, and I am not 100% certain it's using my fixed effects correctly. So long story short, may end up sort of writing code to do this myself, but for now we'll use the auto ARIMA package, and I'll show you here in a second why I'm a little worried about it. But long story short, we're just using what's called the Box-Jenkins methodology, which is you just take a series, you look at its past behavior, and you try to forecast the future path of the variable. And so this would be Colorado, and for whatever reason, it's not, there's always a dip whichever month I exclude. So I wonder, unless it's excluding it for me, but it shouldn't be. So long story short is right, there's that. And then I'll show you what it's like to not include the month fixed effects. So for whatever reason, now there's a large dip in April. So there's something wrong with, well, maybe there's not necessarily wrong, but I'm highly skeptical about what's going on with these fixed effects. So I don't love it. I do think it's important to control for things like the month effects, but I'm not certain I'm doing it correctly. So I just kind of wanted to show you that. And then what would happen if you just, excluded the month effects entirely? Well, I probably don't need to run all of this. But... well, then we just use an autoregressive process, and we don't have the dynamics that you would really expect out of a true, like an actual series. So this is so that's sort of what's going on. And just to kind of show you this in a better visualization with all the months. So now that you can kind of see what's going on. Actually, here, let's do it first without the month fixed effects. So here, just going to iterate over all of the states and do this forecast. And then down here, I've plotted it in a decent plot. So sorry that I'm rushing through the code, but I think the data and visualizations are going to be more interesting. So here, you can kind of see the forecast with the, in here, I can make this larger. So here you can see just, if we just use the autoregressive forecast without any month effects, then the most recent observations and direction really influences our prediction. So, for example, in Colorado, because the last few observations were decreasing, we predict a decreasing trend. Similarly, with Washington, peculiarly, we predicted downwards trend in Illinois. Massachusetts, super tough to predict because it's just had this, volatile number of sales. And so, our forecast is really naive and it's kind of based on this last dip. But, we may actually see Massachusetts, return to a higher level. And then, we're not predicting too much change in Maryland, maybe a slight positive increase. And then, we're predicting a drop off in Maine, which also I'm not quite certain about. So those would just be the autoregressive trends that we would forecast. And then if we add in the month effects, which I say I'm not very certain about, you'll see they seem to give more plausible forecasts except for the month excluded. So, some fix is going to need to happen to better account for that. But that's why, remember our, 10 commandments of forecasting, it's in the forecasting models are going to evolve over time. So now that you've been warned about that this model is far, far from perfect, because something is going on here. Here are, essentially forecasts for the various states. And here, if you include the month effects, besides from this unrealistic drop in January, which I need to fix, I think it's something to do with how the model's predicting. Graham, question?
Yeah, Keegan. From my time as a data scientist, this looks a lot like artificial error and stuff. What you're saying, basically, stuff with the model and how you put in the month excluded. I'm not sure what's happening. My best guess is that sales data keeps some sort of running sum in its forecast, and the plus or minus on each month, each delta T state, is what changes month to month.
Mm.
And when you exclude that month, you also exclude that running total. So that month exclusion principle may be excluding that running total as well. I'm not sure, but I'm going to make a hard guess that it has something to do with how it handles that month excluded.
And you're 100% correct. And so, unfortunately, actually, I can actually tinker with this and make sure that this is correct. So watch for a message from me later today if I fix this. But something's going on. I actually wrote this function myself. So I can double check to see if the breakdown was in there, but I've got a bad feeling I'm going to have to write an ARIMA model with exogenous effects, which is not the end of the world, but that's why I first reach for some packages. But a lot of times with statistics, it doesn't hurt to do it yourself, because statistics are high stake and they're hard to get right. So that was what I did a lot when I was in school. It was basically just writing, just kind of double checking statistics that these statistical packages produce. Making sure the variances are correct and this and that. And like I said, probably 95% of the time you're going to be golden, but something's going on here, and I'm not super confident about these forecasts. So it's unfortunate, but as you've learned, the Cannabis Data Science group, we never really let these hurdles slow us down, or at least not too much. And so we're going to acknowledge that our forecast in January is messed up. And then that may even bias our future result, our future forecasts as well. So our forecasts are going to be biased, but any number, well, not necessarily, but in this case, I feel that any number is better than no number. So long story short, it would just be nice to have a number for what 2022 sales may be, even if it may be wildly off and we revise our forecast in the future. So long story short, this model needs to get fixed. So keep that in mind with the numbers I'm about to show you. But I think we're on the right track. If we can correct January, then we get plausible fluctuation, and we're even able to get Massachusetts to have its unique cyclical trend. So the month effects, I think, are important, but just need to get fixed. So with that said, the last bit was basically to analyze our forecasts. So I thought the simplest way to do it would just be to count the amount of sales that'll happen in 2022. So just to run that bit of code for you. Sorry, I'm rushing through the code, but the nice thing is it'll be on GitHub for you to double check and to read through. So even with our not very believable forecasted dip in January, we're still predicting. And so basically what I'm going to say is I think all of these estimates are biased downwards, because I don't think we're capturing January sales correctly. So I think these are going to be sort of my lower limit forecasts for these states. So you've heard it here, December 22nd, 2021, Keegan Skeet and the Cannabis Data Science meetup group made these predictions. So I'm predicting that Colorado will have at least 1.6 billion in sales in 2022. this may be lower than other people's forecasts. I've heard some forecasts for Colorado as much as 2 billion per in 2022. So my forecast is a little lower than that, 1.6, but it's biased downwards. Illinois predicting will be just shy of 1 billion in sales in 2022. So 934 million. And I'll try to put that into perspective here in a minute, because these are really large figures and it's hard to conceptualize this amount of money. So we'll do that in a second. Massachusetts, 680 million. Maryland, actually not that far behind. And so that's why we may want to fix Massachusetts forecast, because I wouldn't be surprised if Massachusetts comes in a lot above 680 million in 2022. But at least we have an estimate. Maine, around 74 million. Oregon, around 1 billion in 2022. And this is biased downwards, I think. And then Washington, around 1.2 billion. And so we have the populations of the various states. So, you could start to see, well, we could actually potentially look at that, because basically sales per person would be sort of GDP per person, and that would be about how much better off people in these states are. So actually, so a couple of statistics that these will just be kind of for fun. So one thing, that metric that I'd like to use is number of schools. And so in my hometown, a few years back, they built a new school for, I want to say, $2 million. That sounds low, but I swear that's what it was. But, let's say, a new school, costs, $5 million. So now we could, start to, measure, sales as in terms of, the number of new schools. But of course, you can't tax people 100%. So, you could just say, oh, what happens if, you did a tax of, just say, like 7% or something. So this, long story short, is I'm sort of doing this as a lesson for some of the states that may not have permitted adult use yet. We'll just kind of do a thought exercise here and just say, okay, if you taxed all of this revenue at 7%, how many new schools could you build in 2022? So let's see if we can't do this. I'm just kind of spitballing this here just for fun. So let's see if we can't do this. So they're going to get that amount of sales, and they'll tax it at 7%. And then you'll divide that by the cost of a new school. So So that state, could build with this many, new schools. But let's do this first, and then we'll look at sort of the GDP per person. So let's just try this. Like I said, I'm just sort of spitballing this here. But so we're saying a new school costs 5 million, which I don't know if that's accurate or not, but let's say that's the price of a really nice school. Well, Colorado, if they just, and of course, all of these states are already taxed, but, like I said, this is sort of a thought exercise for some new states, and they may be thinking about what to set their tax rates at and what they may want to spend their money on and how far it'll go. Well, let's say, your state, right, right when we have the population here. So population in Colorado in the latest check was 5.8 million people. So, you could build, 23 new schools. So I think that's just sort of a way that you could start to kind of quantify this. And I think, kind of argue, so for example, in, like Maryland, you could say, hey, we only have medicinal, and we can only make 8 new schools. Maybe if we allowed adult use, eventually we could be building, 23 new schools a year like Colorado can do. So I just thought that was an interesting metric, but just really arbitrary, just kind of pulling numbers out of my hat. So nothing special about that, just trying to put some of these numbers in perspective. And then let's see if there's any elegant way to get sorry to do this coding in front of you, but let's see if there's any way to get the latest population. So, oh, and I forgot that we were going to try to predict prices. So that may have to wait till next week, but I can at least try to quantify how much better off people in these states are going to be. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get that series. And basically we want the last population. I don't know if this is going to be, okay, so that's how we can get the latest population. Cool. So we can get, essentially GDP per capita in these states for cannabis GDP. So, the government's always measuring GDP. Well, we can kind of, show how much better off, people are from cannabis. So round this, just do it like that. No promises this is going to work. GDP per capita from cannabis. So no promises this is going to work first try, but we can always try. Okay. So looks like Maine, we may have messed up our calculation, but I always think these numbers look low, but you have to remember, this is everybody in the state, everyone from newborn to retired person. So like in Colorado, everybody's going to be about, almost $300 better off because cannabis is legalized. And those would be people that aren't even consuming cannabis. So this is just more money in the economy. And we haven't even really taken into consideration there could be a multiplier effect. So people that run cannabis businesses, they employ other businesses who in turn employ other businesses. So there's sort of a multiplier effect when you have the these number of sales. And remember, these are sales that may have otherwise been taking place, below ground, not getting taxed, with people who are willing to operate below ground getting this amount of money. And I'm not saying that, everybody's necessarily a bad character, but I mean, this is a lot of money to be, flowing untracked in the economy to potentially some shady characters, right? Like we can't pretend that there are going to be no shady characters in the black market of cannabis. And so that's sort of what my sort of takeaway from today is. And today it's almost more of a lesson to other states. So although we looked at these states, I think this is here. Let's put it all together. I think this is more of a thought exercise for some of the states that may be on the fence about cannabis, because I mean the alternative is you either have a black market in your state with potentially millions of dollars getting into the hands of people that you don't have the least idea about. And the alternative, your opportunity cost, is schools, right? Your opportunity cost of keeping cannabis illegal is potentially building, up to, 23 or so schools. And remember, these are low estimates. So we're going to revise our forecasts here to really try to get as close to the mark as possible. But I mean, I can't think this is anything but a good thing for these states. I mean, Illinois can potentially build 13, top-notch new schools next year. Then the alternative would have been $1 billion, flowing into, who knows whose hands. So I think that's sort of my main point for today. So I guess I just wanted to share it with you. So if any of you are, speaking to, your state legislatures or just, your community, because kind of things like this spread. So like, kind of talk about this with your friends and family and explain to them like, hey, like, not only are they making a large amount of money, but you can put it into concrete terms where, these states could be building dozens and dozens of new schools each year. And that's just 2022. Just 2022. I mean, you could just, and these are growing series. So I forgot to mention that it looks like Colorado, right? Colorado could have peaked, but for the most part, these are growing series. And so, if I was a state, so if I was a state, so here I am in North Carolina, population 10.6 million people. I'd be looking at some of these other states and be saying like, hey, like, Colorado has a population of 5.8 million, and they can build 23 new schools. Like, how many schools could we potentially build? Or Texas has a population of 30 million. Or almost 30 million, right? Well, I guess Colorado is closer to 6 million. So let's say Texas is about 5 times the size of Colorado. Well, Texas, if you legalized adult use cannabis, you're not going to get there overnight, but, you could potentially be building 5 times the number of schools in Colorado. That's 100 schools per year. So if you're, a resident of Texas, I mean, these are sort of the things that you can try to use to persuade people who are on the fence and say like, hey, it's either, this is your opportunity cost. You can either let, millions, if not billions of dollars flow into the hands of who knows who, or you could build, 100 new schools per year in Texas. So these are sort of persuasion tools that I'm arming you with. And so, you can look to states that are doing well. So, and then, and see, how their policies may work or may not work. And so I think that's sort of my main lesson for today, but I kind of want to end it there and see if anyone has any thoughts. But that was sort of what we've been building up to this year is, one, we had to get the data, then we had to analyze it and make our forecasts. And now we can sort of discuss and analyze our forecasts. And so the final statistic I'll leave you with here today is, keep in mind, we've excluded a couple states here from our analysis. So we still need to look at California, the most populous state, almost 40 million people, and we don't have a single good data point yet. So we're working on it. Just haven't looked at California yet, just by happenstance. But we still need to, get Arizona data. In the process of seeing if we can't get Michigan data, which is almost 10 million people. That's comparable to North Carolina. So, and actually still need to get Montana's data. 1 million people there, can't count them out. And so there's still a few more states to add, but even with all the states that we have calculated, we've calculated that there'll be at least 6 billion in cannabis sales in 2022. Just in, just from these handful of states. Not there will be, we predict there will be. So 6 billion in sales. Well, Uncle Sam may want to, start looking at this too, right? Because 6 billion well, actually, I guess these people already are paying taxes. So actually, they may already be paying tax to Uncle Sam. But long story short is, maybe even the federal government may want to start thinking about legalization. Because once again, they may not spend the money on schools per se, but, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of social good that can be had. And so you're now armed with the data. some economic theory, and some statistics, and some know-how about the cannabis industry. So I hope you all go and spread the word, and yeah, keep advancing cannabis science on your own as well. So we're going to keep this up. So as I said, here in 2022, we'll be checking all of these forecasts, right? Because if we're wildly off, we want to admit that and show everybody how wrong we were. So that's something to look forward to. And then the other thing is in 2022, we've been so focused on sales this year. We're going to be digging a lot more into the production side of things. So that way we can start looking at cannabinoids and terpenes, which were some of the things we were set out to look at. And then we can start looking at some more of the cultivation metrics, maybe even start to analyze manufacturing, because manufacturing is something I know the least about in the cannabis industry. So it could be a fun time to learn together. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Don't want to take up too much of your time. I know everyone's time is precious. So any thoughts or comments before we conclude for today?
Nope. I just think it's a good job. It was really informative. You did a good job of just explaining these are for fun statistics at the end. But it was very informative and educational. And I'm excited for the cannabinoids, because I've been messing around with data science with cannabinoids for a little bit, and I would love to hear insights on that as well.
Definitely, Graham. And in fact, if you want to share any of your work, you're more than welcome to. So we've only been able to look at terpene and maybe cannabinoid data from Connecticut. So there's a good data set there that we've been working with. So let's definitely go back and forth and start preparing some good scientific analysis for the coming weeks, because we've gotten so tied in with the economics. Let's get to some interesting scientific questions. So I think there's so much to cover. So definitely stay tuned for some exciting work there.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude it for today. Just so you know, Saturday Morning Statistics is on Christmas, so you don't necessarily have to attend, but I was thinking if you want to sign up and register, so it's just $1, you can still get all of the material. So you don't have to actually attend. You can just, enjoy festivities or what have you. And I can send you the recording and the material afterwards. So just thought I would throw that out there. So if any of you do want to sign up for Saturday Morning Statistics, I always try to make it worth your while. So for $1, I think you'll get, hopefully you'll get more than that in value. So just thought I would promo that real quick. So until next Wednesday or Saturday, if you want to tune in, I hope you all have a productive week. Keep your nose to the grindstone and have fun.